Gotta dance.
What the junk?
Perfect.
It was great.
It was great.
Hey everybody! Welcome to a new episode of What the Junk. And we have a special guest today.
We do.
It's exciting. Well, first of all, I'm Jen with Jen Hill Organizing.
And I'm Brad with Junk King Toledo.
And our very special guest today is...
Jessica Menard, also with Junk King Toledo.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here today, Jessica. We're so excited to have you as our first guest.
I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, good. So
I think we were going to talk about moving.
Yeah.
Because Jessica has lots of experience with moving. But you moved from California to New York and then to Ohio.
Yes, so I definitely have a lot of experience with large moves.
Yeah, that's not
Cross
just like
states.
around the block. Like,
No,
woo.
it takes a lot of work and prep to move a whole household across the country. And, it's a stressful situation.
Absolutely.
And when you're going through it, it can be hard. And so when I was leaving California, there was a whole room. We kind of had a storage issue in that house that I lived at. And we just kind of had a room that was a junk room. And I obviously didn't want to pack it up and bring it with me across the country. But we were under quite the time crunch to be able to pack up the house and move. So I did. I hired a professional organizer out there to help me go through it and really decide what did I need to keep and what did I want to take. So it was a really good experience.
Awesome. So even just like things that you said right there is like, oh my gosh, yep. And like little neurons are going off in my brain of like moving is such a good like natural time to go through all of your stuff. And so like honestly, one of the questions I ask my clients when I'm first getting to know them is like, how long have you been in your house? Because it's a huge indicator. Like, 30 years. I'm like, okay. Like that's awesome. Love that. But no wonder why we've got maybe some issues happening here. So yeah, absolutely. Moving is just one of those times where it's like, okay, is it worth my time packing this? Is it worth my time and money having to have a mover, move all these boxes and then I have to unpack them again? And if it's not stuff that you even enjoy, like what a waste, right? What a waste. So yeah, love that you saw that was something not worth your time and effort, and to get some help to get the time crunch.
Yeah,
and
to get it going, because that was very overwhelming. Just moving across country is overwhelming. Everything that you have to coordinate and plan. Had 2 small children, and just trying to find a house on the other end, register the kids for school. There's just so much involved with moving, so to even have to break it down to that level about making so many decisions about what to take, what to leave behind, it can be challenging. So it was nice to have another person there who could ask me those questions about how would I use this, would I really use it.
Well, and it's interesting too because 2 years later, then you moved to Ohio. And so there was lots of stuff that you did choose to move from California to New York. But then when you moved from New York to Ohio, you chose not to move it.
Exactly. So I had the organizer help me with one room.
Right.
I really should have used her for the entire house.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of, on the other end, I was like, why did I bring this, right? Why do I still have this? So it was a second time to kind of go through and purge and make those decisions again. Did leave a lot behind that time.
Our first argument was definitely over your stuff.
It actually was.
Oh my goodness.
We were trying to do this move in December, right before Christmas. There was a huge snowstorm.
During COVID.
Yep. 3 feet of snow.
So it's fine. Everything's fine. No stress at all.
Oh, all good now. It's all forgotten, right?
Well, so we chose, because it was COVID, we didn't want to be around, moving people. We're kind of on a budget too, because we're trying to like sell a couple houses, buy a house, we're just under a budget. And so we loaded everything ourselves, except for we hired people to move the piano, right?
Smart.
Because the piano's so heavy.
Yeah.
And so so literally, like, I mean, we're paying for every foot that we used, right? So for
Right.
me, with no attachment at all to any of her stuff, knowing what stuff I have on this end,
Sure.
I'm like, why are we moving this? And she's like, well, because we don't have time to sort through it. Like, I don't want to make that decision right now. And I'm like, but you're going to have to make a decision at some point because we're going to fill this thing up. And somebody went and bought a couch in the middle
It
of
was
our
a
move. Yeah.
Great couch.
It is.
We needed that couch.
We love the couch, and our family really comes together around that couch every night. So definitely,
It was a good purchase, right?
it was a good purchase. But when I planned exactly how many feet we needed of a trailer, I did not plan on a new couch. So that was the challenge. So
Was this just like a surprise therapy session? We just need to get some
Right?
things out here right now.
but so we overcame this first fight. But it was
So proud of you guys.
It was really hard because
I'm sure.
There's so many things that I was looking at that I was like, we don't need this. Like, we don't, and Jessica wasn't ready to make that decision because she didn't necessarily know what I had here. But we had 2 full houses of stuff, but then, and then her kids had stuff that she wasn't ready to sort through. And for me, I was moving 15 miles, so it was like, whatever, right? I'm just throwing stuff in my truck and taking it across town, and then at some point I'm going to get a U-Haul and throw the rest of it in there. So I had time, right? But
Right.
she didn't necessarily have time. But it was a very stressful time. So, and in a time where I'm sure organizer on that end too would have been helpful, because there was a lot to sort through.
And a junk removal service actually would have been very helpful on
That was really
end.
hard.
That was a huge challenge. So, I mean, we did decide to leave some stuff behind, but we didn't really have many options at all for what do we do with what we want to leave behind. We had to have the house cleaned out for closing, so that the new buyer could move in. And again, we were hitting up against Christmas, the holidays, the snowstorm. So the garbage services were down, and they wouldn't take everything that we had, and we needed to get rid of.
We had a garage full of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good.
No.
No.
Well, and I think too, even a lot of that stuff that we were getting rid of was good stuff, right? So that was also what was hard, is it was like, we don't want to just throw it in the garbage. But, we had to for some of it. But then I had a trailer hooked to my truck, so it's not even like I'd use my truck and go take care of it, right? So there was just, we were really in a pinch. And so,
Yeah.
I think that was definitely, moving is hard. But it is a great time. So I've moved a lot, right? So, and I've always used every opportunity to get rid of things that I was, and then sometimes I will eye stuff and be like, the next time I move, that's going. It's out of here, right?
Yeah, it's not moving again.
Yeah.
Nope, yeah,
No, it's
it
true.
moved
You've
once.
had,
Yep.
how many different moves have you had?
Well, at one point I moved like 13 times in 11 years.
Holy
So-
Moses.
And a lot of it was, so I lived on college campuses, and so it was like they would move me around every year, and I lived in the building that I worked in, and so one year I might be in this building, another year I might be in this building, and so I physically moved over to that new building, right? And so I got good at just not having a lot of stuff. And then the one time we were given like 24 hours to move because they were overflow for housing, and our apartment was like right in the residence hall. And the university had just built some new faculty staff housing. So for me, I was like, yeah, I'm moving to faculty staff townhouse. Like, this is awesome, right? But there was other people who were living in townhouses, but they were student townhouses. And so they were moving them to the staff townhouses. They were not happy. Like, and some of them, some of them were older. And so like they had just a lot more stuff where I was like, whatever, I'm going to throw my stuff in the bins. We're out of here. I'm moving to that townhouse. Yeah. And so then afterwards, everybody was like, "Oh man, Brett had such a good attitude about that," and I was like, "It's because I was upgrading. Like, I don't own hardly anything, and I was upgrading apartments. So yeah, like I had a garage, like an attached garage. I mean, I was living the life.
Heck
in Fairfax, Virginia, which was like,
dude,
it was like an $1,800 a month townhouse
at least.
So, yeah.
Nice.
So, but yeah, I think moving is a great time, but also a stressful time. I mean, we did not agree on what needed to go and what didn't need to go. And there was things I was like, this is perfectly good. Why are we getting rid of it? But we just packed every piece of art that your child has ever done in their entire life into that truck. But these other things, right? But obviously she wasn't going to throw out like a whole bin full of like her kids' art. But I would. So, not that I don't love your kids, it's just I would throw out my own kids' art if I was moving. So,
But But I think you also bring up a good point too, is that moving takes so much longer than we think it does. Like, to have to go through some of those things. And I think, again, like, the longer you've been in a spot, in the same house, before your next move, it almost takes even longer, right? Like, there's got to be some formula of, like, if you've been in your house X number of years, plan this many months times whatever, I don't know, maybe I'll make one up. Because, it's so challenging and overwhelming. And it's like, oh, I forgot this box had 50,000 smaller things I needed to look through. And it's not like 5 items in this box. It's like 1,000. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, it can be hard because you're living part of your life in chaos, right? And that can be really hard for people who have a hard time focusing when things are chaotic, right? And so on one end, when you're packing, all of a sudden, like, you don't know where anything is because it's all in boxes, or you're trying to, like, find a place for the boxes, especially if you're in a smaller apartment. And then on the other end, you're trying to unpack, and you're trying to prioritize what you unpack, but then you need the pens, and the pens are in a box somewhere, right? And so I know for us, like, it was one of the things that was hard when we moved here is I was used to having a big garage. And this is garage talk again. I love the garage talk. But I was used to having a big garage, but we didn't have the big garage right away. And so I was in a little garage, but I didn't want to pack all the big garage stuff. And then I couldn't find anything. Then I spent half my time looking for stuff. So that just made that transition period really hard. And I know for some people, they may move out of one house and not move to their next house for 6 months. And they're staying in an interim place, especially if they're building a house or transitioning careers.
How crazy the housing market has been. Like, I know several people, like, they just sold their house quick because, like, man, somebody, like, literally is like, hey, are you selling your house because I want to buy it?
Yes.
Like, okay, well, I wasn't planning on this, so let me go find an apartment while I go find another house. So, yeah, that is.
Yeah, we did a junk removal job for a family that, so the woman called me, and she goes, I need somebody to clean out today. And I'm like, all right. And it was like, like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Jessica was with me. I think we were eating lunch, right? And I'm like, all right, like, I can get a crew there, in a couple hours. She's like, we close at like 5 or whatever it was. Like,
oh my gosh.
And she goes, I am so mad because my husband said everything was taken care of. And then they did the final walkthrough and there's stuff everywhere, right? And she's like, we anticipated that we'd have at least a month to move out of this house. But then the buyers came in and they were like, we have cash and we want this house in 2 weeks, right? So they had 2 weeks to like pack everything up and to him, the stuff that was still there was fine because somebody would take care of it. And obviously, when the new people were doing the walkthrough, like, no, we're not getting rid of these people's junk, right? I mean, attic, there was all kinds of garbage stuff behind, like, the shed and, like, packed, right? And so, yeah, we sent a crew over there and we cleaned it all out. It was funny, but she was not funny in the moment.
No, it was not a good time for her.
No.
Bless her heart.
Maybe by now she can look back and laugh.
I hope so. Yeah. But no, you're right. Like, there's just, I think sometimes people think that they're going to have this set amount of time, but if you're selling and somebody comes along and has cash and wants the house in 2 weeks, like, you got to do what you got to do, right? Mm-hmm. Which I definitely think is where hiring some professionals to help navigate that, whether it's packing or whatever. I mean, you're getting good money for your house. Like, invest some of those resources in making your life a little bit easier.
Right. Well, I recently helped a client do a move, and she was actually downsizing. Ended up moving into like an assisted living, independent care facility, and that was super interesting too because like she wasn't taking everything. So as we're walking through the house and like things that to me I'm like, oh man, this is really old and cool. Like there's got to be some history with this. It's just like, yeah, none of this means as much as it used to me. It's like, ooh, wow, okay. Like, it kind of challenged me a little bit, too, of, then you go in your house, you're like, ooh, does this all mean the same to me,
Right.
But even that was, like, so overwhelming for her, too, because there was a lot of change, and, obviously she's a little older, and so it was just a lot of different all at one time, and moves are just overwhelming and chaotic, and God bless America. Like, yeah, it's a fun time. So yeah, definitely getting some help is
definitely
so nice.
I mean, we really could have used it there at the end of that move, and I think that's part of the reason we decided to start Junk King Toledo is because we thought it was definitely a needed service. We liked that Junk King tries to recycle as much as possible and donates a lot of stuff, so it's not just going to the dump. That really appealed to us.
Yeah, and a lot of the customers that we've had have been people who are moving, and we get a lot of people too who, kind of like what you said, like, you know, they've identified like we're not moving these things, so come and get them. And I always, when I leave and I know they're moving, I'm like, at the end, you know, feel free to give us a call. We'll come back and get the rest. And they're like, no, we got everything we need. Almost every time. We come back at the end, they got a pile of boxes of stuff, or everything in the garage can go, because I think, you know, it's easy to quickly go through and identify like stuff kind of quick, but then as you really kind of start evaluating, you know, what is it worth it, right? Does it mean, is it like falling apart? So even if I like
space?
it, right? Yeah. Where am I moving? What am I? Yeah.
Space in the truck, even, you know.
Right?
Yeah, like, oop, you're not making the cut.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, so for a lot of those, we do multiple, and I think it really helps a lot. Like, so I think it'd be great for us to, you know, maybe lay out some of the tips. I think we've all moved at least a few times, right? And I know I always found it useful to get rid of those things right at the beginning. That I was like, all right, I know for sure these things are not going. It can go, load it up in my car, take it to Goodwill, call somebody to get it. Yeah. Whatever, right? It's time for it to go.
Get it out of your sight, and then that way it's not in your way when you're trying to pack up everything else.
Right, absolutely.
And then when it does get to be crunch time, you're not feeling panic, like I just got to throw everything in the truck and I got to go, right? Like it's already gone. So there's no pressure that like I have an hour before I got, you know.
And there have been multiple calls like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Multiple customers who've been same day. Like they're not going to get to close and sell their house.
Yep, we did a job at like 7 a.m. because they were closing at 9.
That is so stressful.
Yep. And so we did a walkthrough, and they're like, we know all these things are going, but they were downsizing, right? And like, we're still trying to figure out some of the other pieces, whether they'll fit, won't fit, and so I was like, all right, like, well, when do you want to do this? And they're like, well, we close at 9, you know, on Friday, right? And this was on like Wednesday, and I'm like, all right, like we can come tomorrow, and they're like, can you come in the morning? And I'm like, what time in the morning? Like, you're closing at 9, right? And they're like, can you come at 7? So I was like, all right, I got some morning guys, so we'll be there at 7. So we were. So, I think but I think for me, like getting that stuff out of there really helps. And then the stuff that's like iffy, right? Like I might take this, I might not take this. And then that's a great place, you know, to find that space with the maybes, right? So that way, when it is crunch time, you got to make those decisions about what does go and what doesn't go. Like this stuff goes, right? We can just get rid of it. The organizer, I think hiring somebody to help you sort through this stuff.
I would say be kind to yourself on the other side of the move. And if you have time, or if you know a move might be coming up in your future, just start going through stuff now. And doing that and saving yourself once you move.
And that's even good for like when you're listing your house, right? If you're listing a house, I mean, the first thing you want to do is get rid of all the clutter stuff, and anything that's like kind of personal, and you know, either box it up for the move or get rid of it. And I think that the organizer, like hiring somebody, helps take the emotion out of it, which I think can be good. And then I think not being afraid to get rid of stuff after you move, right? I think sometimes we get in like, I just moved this 3,000 miles and I just spent a fortune to move it.
Yeah,
like,
so don't hold on to it.
I got to keep it now for the rest of my life. And then 2 months later, when you're moving to Ohio, you're like, all right, I can go now. It's gone.
Yeah. So I guess another tip that I would have with moving is start in a room that you don't use a lot, you know, because especially if you're starting early, you know, you're not going to start with your kitchen because that's just bad news bears. But so start in an area or a space, or like if you know a move is coming soon, and you know, pack the out of season clothes, you know, stuff like that where you're not going to need those
stuff you're
right
not
away.
Using every day.
Exactly. So that's a good way to kind of just get started. and being able to take some of your time to go through it more thoroughly. So that's, I guess, one of my tips.
Anything that can help reduce some of the stress on everybody, especially kids. Like, I think some kids are very good about change and move, and some kids are not. Like,
some adults aren't.
I know.
Let's be real.
My child doesn't really like things changing, and I think because he's had a lot of change in his life, right? And so, it kind of like stresses him out. Like, his room here is the exact same color as his room in the last house, and his room at Jessica's house before she moved here was the exact same color. So like every room's been the same color, and so I think that can like kind of help with that. Just I think if you're like creating disruption in the rooms that you're always using, it can be hard to focus when you need to focus.
Right.
Especially now in the day of like working from home.
Right.
So
true.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah. Any last words of wisdom, Jessica? Put you on the spot right there.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
How is it to be our first guest?
You know what? I am very honored. I do appreciate. I love your podcast, so I'm like your number one fan, I think.
We didn't even pay her to say that.
I know.
Man.
The other day when I was editing it, she was listening. I was like, you can't listen now. Like, you gotta wait until I publish it. Like, so, but I'm pretty sure you did watch it later, so we can get a count on there.
Yes.
Otherwise it doesn't count. So.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So on that note, thank you so much for subscribing. Whether you're listening to this through a podcast app, like Apple, Google, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or if you're watching this on YouTube, because then you get to see us dance the intro music and have a great time with that. So
And the YouTube subscribe is right here, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
Click that.
Because I think before we pointed up here, but it's not up here. It's down here.
Okay, good to know.
So.
Awesome. Well, on that note, true Midwesterner goodbye. Goodbye again. And we'll see you next time for What the Junk.